everyone, welcome back to the arena. I'm MD, joined by Matt over here to my right, as well as just another awesome guest that we cannot wait to get into. Before any conversation, you know how it goes. We'll always thank and show love and appreciation back to those that continue to follow us and show the same back.
What's up, everyone? Matt here. Like MD said, we've got a guest that I'm really excited to introduce you all today. And I want to tell the story of how, and this is Kenneth Nole. I want to tell the story of how I met Kenneth, because I haven't met any other guests this way, but I was doing a volunteering event through Capital One, and we're volunteering at an organization called Hope Chicago, who Kenneth works for. And long story short, then Kenneth could tell it better than I could, but working with seniors in high school that or at a Chicago public school and helping them financially and also with just assistance through other means as well to get into a school in Illinois. So any school in Illinois. Long story short, I was a group leader. And so I basically, and it was a big workshop day of the kids. So they went to a bunch of different workshops. One, mental health was one that I was blown away by, but they had some other ones as well. And so I was just taking them from workshop to workshop. In the last session of the day, so this is at the end of the day, full day of stuff, I took my kids to Kenneth's workshop, which was centered around, this is the second year of the program. So they had kids that have already gone through the first year. So they were just finished their freshman year in college. And they had basically a panel, and Kenneth was the moderator of this panel with these kids. And I was just absolutely blown away by Kenneth's ability to just control the room and just bring so much energy into a room and really engage the whole audience. I mean, he was asking the kids question, and I remember I was raising my hand. Like I was that engaged, and so I just went up to Kenneth afterwards, and we got to talking, and sure enough, my instincts were right. I mean, Kenneth is a really inspiring person. So without further ado, Kenneth, why don't you just provide a little bit of a background on kind of who you are and kind of how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. Let me first say, Matt, everybody, is my new brother from another mother. And you just don't know when you need sober people around you. And just my encounter with Matt after, him being a part of that session at Go Getters Conference for Hope Chicago, went out to lunch, and I was like, yep, Matt's my brother. I was like, you just need healthy people around you. And so who I am, I'm Dr. Kenneth Nole, and I born on the south side of Chicago. To a single mother and her parents, my grandparents. And I say that like that because I grew up in the house with my grandparents. My mom lived with my grandparents for a very long stint. And not that she could not be on her own, but I'll talk about this a little bit more, but there was some sense of wanting to be near and close to her parents, fear of leaving them, right? My grandparents are not as learned, and I think that's why my mom wanted to stay around. My grandfather finished the third grade. My grandfather comes from a family of 23 siblings from my great-grandparents, Emma and Eddie Crane Sr., and my great-grandfather passed away in 1961. He was a veteran. And my grandfather had to take care. He was the oldest boy. He had to take care of 23 siblings. So my grandfather could not read, and my grandfather could not write. And still to this day, my grandfather still has a problem reading certain things or even writing. He needs assistance, and my grandfather is 85 years old, right? Been a very successful man, but still struggled along the way. But here's the most powerful thing. I think who you partner with and who you marry is extremely important. He married my grandmother, who was a very strong-willed woman. And my grandmother is still one of my favorite people in this world. I'm just really happy to have my grandparents still with me today. My grandmother is turning 78 on her birthday, and we're getting closer to the 80s. She was about 45 years old when I was born, so watching her age is a little, shaky for me, but that's okay. We're getting up there, right? And so my grandmother, she only finished high school. She went further than he did, but she finished high school, so she had a little bit more context. She had more language. She knew how to navigate in the city of Chicago. They're from Panola, Alabama. little small city that you don't even see on the map. Like you have to literally look to really find it. And so they got together, had my mom, my uncle, and my mom went a little further than them. She went to college, right? She went to beauty school. Beauty school, cosmetology was really important for my mom. But here, Lord and behold, my mom got pregnant with me. Her first semester as a freshman in cosmetology school. I said all that to say this, is that when my mother got pregnant with me, what she did not know was that she was pregnant with someone who would literally break all of the curses and break all of the rules. And so you see this passion is because I was the one that had to really change the trajectory of my family history. Education was important because my family did not have it. I am the first in my family to go off to, well, not the first in my family to go to college. I had two cousins who went to college, and they're much older than me. They're my mom's generation. But I am the first in my family to go to a master's program and complete the master's program. I went to Emroy University. Let me take it back. Went to Morehouse College, proud Morehouse man, HBCU, and went to Emroy University in Atlanta, Georgia. And after I graduated with my master's, I came back home to become an educator, because I fell in love with the passion of education. I developed the passion of education. I wanted to teach students, not just black and brown, but students, this dialogue. I wanted to take them through what it was to know who they were and to show up in the world, right? And to speak eloquently, to sit in a room and know exactly how to facilitate and navigate a conversation. As a Morehouse man, I learned how to be well-read, well-spoken, well-dressed, well-traveled, and well-balanced, right? And so I wanted to impart that, pour into other people what that was. And make a long story short, I became a teacher in the inner city of Chicago. And from there, I saw a lot of injustices, right? I wasn't too privy of 504s, IEPs in the educational space. But I knew that these black and brown children were brilliant. They didn't have problems. But I knew that being from the south side of Chicago, seeing things, and we'll get to this in a minute, mental health, people talking to themselves, walking down the street. Here in Chicago, when we say stuff like 79th Street, 63rd Street, we know from where I come from, we know exactly what that is and the struggles that people have. And I knew that these children were not crazy. These children grew up without fathers. They grew up without some of their mothers. Some of their mothers were deceased, gang related, things of that sort. And so here I am, this teacher in a classroom, and I see injustice. No, it's time to get another degree. I left the classroom and I stepped into my doctorate program in transformational leadership because I want to transform spaces. And transformational leadership within the context and framework of cultural transformation. Now, I did my dissertation, my work outside of education, which was African American women with HIV on the south and west side of Chicago, really analyzing the stories of black women with the lived experience of having HIV. And the reason why, that was important to me was because my mom was in a 9-year relationship where the man that she was with at the time had contracted HIV. From sharing needles, drugs. And so she was unaware that he was, on drugs and doing different things like that. And so it came out. And I remember my mom coming home, and I'll pause here because I know we have a whole lot to really dig into. But this is just who I am. This is how I show up. My mom came home one day and she was crying. And I remember my mom telling my grandmother that the man she was with had HIV. And my grandmother, y'all remember I told you that this is one of my favorite women in the world. My grandmother, very pious woman, very disciplined woman, I have never seen my grandmother waver. I have never seen her use profanity. I've never seen it. She does not like gossip. If you talk about anybody in front of her, she's like, hey, take that out the room. We're not talking about, so my grandmother is a very strong strong woman of faith. And I remember my grandmother was folding towels at the table. The house was extremely quiet on a Saturday. And she looked at my grandmother and she says, she looked at my mom and she says, yeah, She says, but you can't step over my prayers. She said, and neither can he. She said, he may have it, but you don't. Go back and get tested. And my grandmother never stopped folding towels. She never looked up. And my mother looked up. She said, but did you hear what I said? She said, I heard what you said. She said, but I said to you, you can never step over my prayers. And go back and get tested. He has it, but you don't. My mom went and got tested 3 times, came back negative. And I knew that as a young man, that it wasn't trauma for me, but I knew years later that I wanted to do a story on what this was, and I wanted to help other people. So here I am showing up in this space, Matt. This is who I am, Dr. Kenneth Nole. I'm an educator. I'm a lover of people. And yeah, I got a history.
That was an extensive background, but I hopefully all you all that are listening right now can see why I wanted to bring Kenneth on the show so badly. And maybe we'll just start with, you mentioned in terms of like why you want to do what you do. You wanted to help kids figure out who they are.
Yeah.
How do you help them do that, and how did you figure out like who Kenneth is?
Yeah, I actually, let me say this. We are on a journey where we're still trying to figure out. I'm a lifelong student. I'm still, in every season of my life, I'm trying to figure out who I am. But as a child, I realized that there were a lot of pieces that were missing. I grew up, my dad was in my life, but he was not necessarily present. And now that I'm an adult, I am a married man. I understand my father got married, had been married, I think now for 30 years. And to the woman he got married to, they moved from Chicago. My dad left when I was 12 years old. And I talked to a therapist, and the first thing that they said was, or the first thing I said was, yeah, my dad left me. He said, did you hear what you said? I said, yeah. He said, you said your dad left you, but he did not. And so I had to realize, whoa, the language that I was using for so long was based on how I looked at my father. You left me. Here's why I say that, is because a lot of the places in my life, the brokenness that I could really recall is not necessarily having my father really present to give me himself and then to really walk me through what manhood really looked like. I had my grandfather, I had uncles, I had my pastor, people from the church that I was connected to. I was surrounded by men around me who could teach me how to change a tire, or say, hey, this is how, play basketball. Now I'm a sports fan, but please don't throw me a basketball. Don't put me on your team at all. But the brokenness that I felt was growing up in a house, my grandfather was always gone. My grandfather was either, doing something out in the streets, or, with my uncle somewhere, drinking in the garage or whatever. And I was in the house with my grandmother and my mom. And so what happened was, a lot of what I could have got, what I should have gotten from the male figures, I didn't have it. And I saw, this is where I'm going with this conversation. I saw a lot of brokenness from the female side. And so the very strong person that I am, I started to develop a deep sensitivity where I wanted to help them so much, and I could not help them. My mom, this man that she was with, not only did he contract HIV, but my mom was a victim of domestic violence. I remember my mom would come home with black eyes and her face busted. This is the type of stuff that broke me as a child, and I did not know that it was causing traumatic moments, so that when I grew up as a man, or when I grew up as a young black boy in the inner city of Chicago, that when I went to school on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I thought I was okay, but really there was a gap in me. So I was growing up with this gap, and I did not know why there was this sense of sadness. Why am I growing up and I'm just sad? It's because I'm watching the pain of my grandmother, who is going through a tumultuous marriage. They're still married to this day, right? But I grew up in a time when they were really going through, my grandparents, right? And I watched it. I'm going through a time when my mom is a 20-something-year-old. She doesn't even know who she is, but she's raising a little boy to become a man. And her baby daddy he's gotten married, he's gone to another state, he has another job, he has other kids, my siblings here in Chicago, and here I am trying to figure out life. I don't really know what to give him, but as a 20-something-year-old, I'm in this relationship, I'm bitter, I'm growing up with all of this pain, so my son has to live my pain like I lived my mother's pain. So I'm growing up and I'm literally walking around with pain. So as I grew up, and I'm going back to your question, Matt, as I'm growing up, even as an adult, there are pockets of sadness that I have to now think, wait, hold on. This is not you. This is something that's there, that's still healing from years ago, because you had to watch somebody else's pain that's not even yours. And so why did I want to go into the classroom to teach students who they were? I really wanted to go into the classroom because I knew that there were other boys and young men of color, other young girls from the inner city of Chicago. The school that I would literally taught in was 3 minutes away from where I was born and raised. It was a minute from where my mother went to elementary school. So I knew that they had the same story. Why not pour back into them? Because their mothers grew up with my mom. And I know if my mom had the same story and she was connected to their mom who was in the streets and who was fighting in gangs, they too had the same story. And here I am. I have to come back to let them know through the lens of technology that other people see you like this, but you are much more than what they say. And there's much more to you than what people can see.
Kenneth, I want to take a big step back pretty much to the beginning of your story.
Yeah.
You mentioned you were the one who broke this curse, so to speak, and
Yeah.
it seemed like you gravitated towards the importance of education. We hear the phrase all the time, like stay in school, and stay
Yep.
on that right path. I'm curious, given your household and the lack of that male figure, what do you think it was for you at such a young age that you realized staying in school was the right path, or what ultimately attracted you to education? Did you have somebody who helped you realize that, or was that something you did on your own?
Mike, that's a really strong question. I wish he was still living. The late Dr. Royce D. Cornelius was the male figure in my life, who I always wanted to be like. He was my pastor. I was not around him every day, but on Tuesdays and Sundays, even Wednesday nights, throughout the middle of the week, I was in his presence, and he was the first PhD. I was born into his church. He was the only PhD, the first PhD that I saw. Very well spoken. I mean, when this man opened his mouth, there was not broken English. His hair was slicked back with finger waves. He was a very clean-cut black man, and he wore very strong, nice suits. He drove a BMW. I remember as a child, I was like, man, I just really want to be like him. And so, as I grew up, fast forward, just being in elementary school, he would show up sometime to my school just to check on me, with permission of my family. He knew the principal. He's like, hey, I'm just here to check up on my boy. And when I got in high school, he's like, no, what are you doing? Are you paying attention? Are you going to class? I want to see them grades. So I would have to report back to him. And along with my family, he helped raise me, right? And so by the time I got to college, he gave me his entire encyclopedia collection. The entire collection, Mike. I am a book fanatic right now, if you can see my background. Because of that man, I knew how to read. I knew what to read, how to really gather language because of him. And when I went to Morehouse because of him. And he said one Sunday, he said, hey, we're sending him to Morehouse. And I looked at it. I was like, you sending me where? I went to Columbia College in Chicago. I was a business major, finished my sophomore year. And he was like, no, you're going away to college and you're going to be exactly what you're supposed to be. And so, Mike, I remember walking through the promenade at Morehouse, just really thinking about him. And I knew that when I got there, hey, I want to go further. I want a master's. I want a doctorate. I want to teach. I want to do everything because I saw how powerful and impactful he was to the inner city of Chicago and the world. And so that's what inspired me to do education. He did not do the bare minimum. He was above. Like everybody wanted him in the room to teach and to expound. Again, when he talked, everybody listened. He used words. I'm like, what in the world does that mean? You know what I mean? And so it's who I am now. My vocabulary expanded because of him. So yeah, Mike, that's why I showed up in the space of education.
Help us understand what he was up against when it came to keeping you on
Yeah,
the right track and being a positive influence. Speak to the negative forces that he was up against and ultimately seemingly prevailed.
yeah. So just his story, he passed away October of 2019. And I miss him sorely. But his story, the parts of his story that I am aware of is he was never really stationary, right? He was homeless. He lived out of his car. He was from Detroit, Michigan, also from the era like and adjacent to my grandparents where he had lots of siblings. I think he had like 20 siblings, and his parents were from Mississippi. And for him, his family was not educated. And so he had the chance to be connected. He grew up in a Baptist church where he was also connected to his pastor, who was extremely astute. One of the first black men at the time, his pastor, to really have education, go off to college. And so he got that, that connection to education. But what he was up against was homelessness, lack of money. But then also when he began to really impact people, he was up against a civil rights movement during the 1960s is when he started to really articulate and be connected to people. And he was up against a people who was oppressed, right? Oppressed by the system, oppressed by, just not having jobs, not being able to vote. And so he had to really be a voice during that time. I was a 1980s baby. Growing up in the 90s, he was still up against the same things, right? Preaching to people who was poor, low class, middle class people who did not have the education. So he had to really walk them through, this is what this means. Literacy. Like he was so profound that we had literacy classes on just like finances and, things like that. He brought that into the city, which was something that was not known in the inner city of Chicago by leaders such as his caliber. And so, yeah, he was up against it. And so here I am, a little boy growing up in the 1990s, and I'm watching him be a trailblazer. And I'm watching him give context and language. And I'm like, hey, I got to be like you when I grow up. So,
Was
yeah.
there ever a time that you almost veered off that track though? Like were there ever negative forces pulling you away that he helped keep you on?
I would say no. And the only reason why I would say that is because by the time, Mike, I started to really experience opposition, I had a good childhood, what I would say, right? What I thought. I didn't really hit opposition until I became an adult. I was really shielded from a lot of the opposition, right? That he saw, my parents saw, grandparents saw. So by the time I really started to hit it, he became sick. So he really could not give himself to, hey, this is what you should do, or like, stay away from this. And so he died of cancer. And so he went through the stages, like he literally became weaker and weaker and weaker. So he could not keep me away. And I think the opposition that I was up against is just really learning how to navigate in a world where, if I can say this, being in a home as a child, I didn't experience rejection, but I experienced rejection from the world because I was so shattered, covered by my family. And so when I experienced rejection from the world and trying to show up as an educated black man or as someone who can help others through, different systems, when I experienced that, he was nowhere to be found. And again, that's because he was sick. And so I had to really navigate through this space by myself. I really did. And Mike, Matt, this is why I show up so passionately now, is because I am the template. I am the one to shield other young men who are in the shoes that I was in at the time that I did need him.
How did you do that, Kenneth? He's not
Yeah,
there anymore. What
yeah.
worked for you? Like
Oh,
we talked a little bit
yep,
about just like meditation and what that
yep.
was for you, but just talk through some of that stuff.
Yeah, Mike, number one, I was inspired by your story and just mental health. Coming from where I come from, and I'm just framing this to answer your question. Coming from where I come from, mental health was not talked about at all. We did not discuss mental health. If anything was about someone, and hear me, we don't say phrases like this, or someone being crazy. That's how that's how we communicated back then, right? Somebody's crazy, or they're out of their mind, or they, they are not, how would they say it? They're not in their right mind, or something like that. It would literally be people talking to themselves, right, on drugs, or things like that in the inner city of Chicago. And if I heard anybody going to get help, they were going to the mental ward, literally, right? But we didn't talk about having a tune-up, a mental tune-up, going to see a counselor or a therapist to help you through moments that I watched my grandmother and my mother go through. And so for me, Matt, I didn't know when I hit opposition to go and sit in front of a counselor or a therapist. I didn't even know what therapy was until I got in my master's program. I was in my 20s when I really learned what a therapist was. I'm 33 now. I'll be 34 in September. That was literally a couple of years ago, probably a decade ago, that I really found out what a therapist was. And so how did I do it? It was literally meditation. I would listen to slow soaking music, worship music, and there are times, Mike, I would just weep. I would just really cry. Music that wouldn't make me feel sad. I felt like my tears were really bottled up. It was more so like the water that you pour on a plant and it comes alive. Like my tears were bottled up from the seasons that I went through, painful relationships with, ex-girlfriends, or I felt like I was alone, or I remember times prayer was a big thing for me. Meditation, Matt, as I told you before, I would just sit in my floor and just listen to music, close my eyes, and just sit there until I felt better. And these are moments, even when I did my dissertation, these are moments scientifically and with data that shows people being successful, even along and coupled with therapy. Now that I know what it is, meditation is extremely powerful because it rebuilds and retrains the brain. So Mike, I rebuilt my brain by meditation.
So I want to just touch on something you mentioned around sitting there and weeping.
Yeah.
When you hear somebody say that, you're picturing somebody sitting in a room with headphones on, just crying to themselves, and it sounds so weird, but I think everybody, I don't know, most people, we've all sat there and wept and poured, released that pressure and let those tears flow out that you said
Yeah.
was bottled up.
Yeah.
What's your realization at the conclusion of that event, if you will? Like, once you're done
Yeah.
crying, are you looking in the mirror and being like, why did that just happen and what's wrong with me? Or are you looking back at it and saying, connecting all the dots, right? And saying, this is
Yep.
why I'm sad and this is actually healthy. This is probably a good thing that
Yeah.
I'm expressing this emotion.
Yeah, Mike, that's a really good question. Let me say this, that sometimes weeping is not a bad thing.
Right.
It's not always. I wasn't weeping because I was sad. Sometimes I was, but I wasn't weeping because I was sad. There are times when your heart needs to vent, right? And sometimes people are like, why am I so sad? Is because your heart needs an outlet. And you're walking around and you're like, I don't really know what's wrong with me. It's nothing really wrong with you. Your heart just needs an outlet. And sometimes whether it comes through the sound of music, or it just comes through the sun being so beautiful, or it comes through a cloudy day where you feel like you're more in tune with yourself, that you just start weeping. My moments of weeping were because I was in tune with how I was feeling. Whether I felt like, okay, today is really a good day, but I just feel like the season that's ahead of me is going to be a big one. I'm not ready for it. And I would just start to just weep. And so, Mike, the moments and I said this literally this morning, is that sometimes we go through life and we're so disappointed. And wherever there is disappointment, there is bitterness. If there's a longevity of disappointment, there will be an introduction of bitterness, where now your heart becomes callous, and you can be in the presence of those laughing, and you can be in the presence of jokes, and all you can do is fake and fight a smile, because what you're trying to fight is an unexpectation or a disinterest in a future that you do not see. And so there are times when I was weeping because I did not see the future. I could not have an expectation. I did not have an interest in the future because all that filled my heart was a disappointment of my reality.
So how do you get, Kenneth? I stop you there. How do you get out of that feeling? Because I
Yes.
remember for a long time, like you're preaching to prior Matt. Like I
Yep.
remember people being just so happy go lucky. Like I would have seen you and I would have been bitter about it. I'd been like,
Yeah.
I would try to bring that person down to
Yes.
where I was. So like, how do
Yeah.
you get out of that?
Yeah, Matt, I think the one thing, and this is what I did. The one thing that I would do was surround myself with things that matter. Sometimes we shy away from family. Some people's story, their family is a reason of their trauma, right? But family can be defined by anything or it could be your friends, right? But for me, I had to really get around my family. My family is very loud. They are we love to have fun. Playing cards. I would surround myself around family. The next thing, I did not know what liquor was or drinking, or I didn't try to cope with anything. I did it with, I'm an extrovert, right? Love to talk, but I did it around being getting myself together around being with my family. Another thing too was self-care. Man, I'm a person that loves to go get a manicure, pedicure, a massage, and of course eating some good food, more practical things. I still do that to this day when I'm battling sadness because I'm human. There are times when I'm still wrestling with this new season of my life and new responsibility I have, or even failure of the last season, and I'm like, how can I do? So if I'm trying to juggle that, I'll do something that makes me happy. Another thing too is happiness is not predicated on your peace, right? And I think that sometimes you got to find. There's a thing behind me, and I wanna pivot to it. Find, if you can see it, there it goes. Find the joy in the journey. And so that's a slogan that I've had, Matt, for a long time, and I'll stop here. I would literally try to find something that makes me happy. If it was something on TV to laugh at, or if it was going to brunch with a friend. Brunch makes me happy, y'all. Like a rooftop in Chicago. Put me on a rooftop in Chicago in the summertime, and I am going to have the best experience ever, right? That's who I am. So yeah, Matt, practical things. But moments of sadness, you're going to always have them, but find something that makes you happy to come out of those. Interrupt it with a smile. Scientifically, if you're sad, just smile. And it's going to confuse your brain of where you are. Thus, it will heighten your mental health.
Kenneth, did you ever try to bring this back home? Because I know what you've done is you've brought it to students and people that you saw a lot of your former self in.
Yep.
But, let's take your grandmother for an example. She seems
Yes.
like a great role model in your life. You mentioned things like she doesn't waver, right? And she's probably a little bit more stoic and isn't very expressive of emotions. I'm assuming these things based off of 10-minute description of your grandma. I'm just curious, like, as you start to learn and become more self-aware and start to understand, hey, crying is not a bad thing and there's trauma in my life that I need to work through. Is that something you found that you were able to bring back home, or were they saying that you're not in the right state of mind? And, what's it like working with somebody who's 2 generations before you and conditioned a certain way through all those stigmas that you had mentioned? What has that been like for you to go back to now maybe your grandmother? Do you even attempt that?
Oh, Mike, all the time.
How's that going for you?
It's going very, very well. I think even with my mom, even with my grandfather, most men, we can become prideful and, how we really show our emotions or just really be vulnerable with information. But even with my grandmother was not shy of her expression or even weeping. She would do that. It was more having the language for why she was weeping. And I think for me, Mike, what I've learned over the years in just my reflection and meditation is I developed the revelation or the language for why things are the way that they are. And taking it back to my grandmother, there are moments when, like, my grandmother suffers from arthritis. I'm a person of science. There's a saying that says that when there's life in your bones, or when there's laughter, it brings life to your bones. And as I was doing research, even in my dissertation study, I realized, even in conducting the research, was that most of the women who were had contracted HIV, they had gathered bitterness within them from contracting it, and it turned into arthritis. That could be something different. That's a whole nother conversation, right? And I'm not saying that that's the sole reason why people have it. It can be, based on your family history. Yeah. But I remember telling my grandmother, I remember asking her questions like, what is something in you that you've bottled up, that you've never gotten a chance to really express, that really made you angry, and you're still angry about? I would phrase it like that.
That is first of all, that's, imagine going up to your friend and asking him that question.
Yes.
I mean, your grandma? Like, I don't, at what point in the conversation, it couldn't be, "Hi grandma, my day was great. By the way, what's something that you," like, at what point do you bring that up?
But
how did that go?
Mike, so I grew up as being who I am. Nobody was really expressive like me as a child. And growing up, I gathered a lot of influence. Being a singer, I've traveled around the world. I've sung for Celine Dion, background for Celine Dion. Like, I've been, in various spaces. And I said all of that because my grandmother, my family looked up to me.
And I want to pause you right there, because there's a quote about leadership that I love, which is, good leaders earn followership, great leaders build up other leaders. And, I think we should recognize your family figures, your mother and your grandmother, and perhaps even your grandfather, for being great leaders, because what they did was they developed you a good leader. Your pastor as well, we'll include him in the fold, but then you can come back and become the role model to who used to be. Yeah, right? So I see the head nods. It's just really cool to be able to see the return on investment, if you will, what it pays to be able to invest in people, from a young age, and build up their leadership qualities so that they can come back even smarter and stronger to then become your role model.
Yeah, you become their leader. I've become my family's leader. My mom, to this day, she's my mom. But there are times when she'll call me, she'll say, "Hey, Kenny," and Kenny's my family nickname. And she'll say, "Hey, Kenny, what do you think about XYZ?" And I'll go, "Hey, Mom, I think, bop, 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 bop." And so, being also intellectual, knowing how to really articulate myself, really not having to grapple on just information, I'm able to give context. And so my mom's like, "Oh, okay, well, that's good," or "That sounds really good." And my grandmother's like, as I start to really become more robust in motivational speaking and really give more context, my grandmother, everywhere I go, if I travel out of the state or out of the country, she's like, "How can I tune in?" And she's listening. And when I come back, she's like, "You said something, woo, that was good." Or, "What did you mean by that?" Or, "What does this word mean?" Right? There are many times she will call me and say, "I heard this word in my dream. What does comprehension mean?" Right? Because again, my grandmother, they didn't grow. She went to high school. She didn't have, more of an education to know or to have context into what certain things mean. And so I would tell my grand, "Oh, that's really good. That's what that means." So now I'm able, because they've seen me deal with myself. They've seen me handle pressure. They've seen me walk through moments of uncertainty and still overcome. So now they can look at me and say, "Wait, hold on. I didn't do that at your age, but you did it. Let me see. What is your insight on XYZ?" And so now I'm able to talk to my 78-year-old grandmother and say, "Hey, there's some stuff in there that you never really got over. Tell me about that." And for her, my grandmother would be like, "Whoa, I didn't really think about that, but you made me think," and she would start to weep. Like, I didn't really think that was there. Moments when she would bring up moments about her father, things that she had checked out of, right? That were triggering to her. I would say, "How does that make you feel?" And right now, being the strong woman that she is, she tried to do away with it, because her doing away with it helped her become strong, but it also really helped you become weak. And I let her know that, like, "Hey, no, you're more stronger than that. You now have to work through it so you can become stronger. So, and I say that to say this, Matt, and I'll pause. My grandmother, and just dealing with her mental health at 78, has become more stronger in her hands and her feet and her legs because of dealing with some of the things that.
Well, that just shows that it's never too late to start working on yourself, and I think
Matt,
there's a lot of people out there that could benefit from that, because even people that are, in their 50s, early 60s, you've still got 30 plus years of life left, and there's a lot more to life than for a lot of people, and I think people should really listen to that and take that to heart. I have a question for you. Like, when did you most recently, I don't want to say struggle, like I think you had mentioned faced opposition. Was it like a few years ago? When was it for you? This is a simple question because I got a follow-up coming.
Yeah. I think for me, opposition, I'm spoiled. I'm a spoiled man. I tell you, my family really spoiled me. I grew up middle class. My family always worked, and so I didn't know what it was to be without. And so I literally graduated in 2018 with my doctorate. From the time that I was a school age student to 2018, for 20 plus years, 28 years, all I knew was the classroom. And when I graduated from the classroom, here I am getting my first job as a teacher, and life hits me. And conversations outside of home start to arise. Being in a job with other people, learning other personalities. Again, I was sheltered. It really hit hard, but I also got married in 2018. I didn't really know, of course, as I said before, I watched my grandparents struggle in their marriage. So I'm trying to make sure. My father was divorced, after his first marriage, 2 years after being married, divorced. And so here I am fighting, like making sure that I don't become what I've seen. And the pressures of it, right? Having to really get a job and really take care of my home, and having to work because now everything is on my shoulders. Oh, y'all, it hit me. It hit me hard. Then I welcome a year later after marriage, my wife gets pregnant with our daughter. And I always wanted to be a father and a husband, but when my daughter came, I didn't know that being a father came with so many responsibilities and losing my sleep. And here I am now in the core of my career as now not just Kenneth Nole, but Dr. Kenneth Nole, where I can now give strategy, insight, skill. And here I am having to navigate the challenges of the nonprofit space and even the corporate space and things I don't like. And where in the heck am I? The stress coming home. And now I go from one job to another job to another job to the pandemic. And here I am collectively grieving with the world. But then as a man, my wife gets pregnant again. Now we have our baby boy. What in the world is happening to my life? So many transitions, so many oppositions up against me. And I cannot run back to my family and say, help. I have to now do what they taught me to do. Not struggle, not just survive, but to go through it. And so again, that's where my mental health, I literally saw a therapist for the first time in 2019. I was like, hey, I think I'm correct. My mind is, I don't know what it is.
You're going to use the word that you've grown up, the crazy
right,
word.
Exactly, man. That was the phrase. It was literally generational, right? That's exactly how we phrase it. Like I'm out of my mind. But that's not the truth. I was going through transition and I did not have the language or the skill and the strategy to really overcome that season.
Do you feel like, how do you feel therapy is viewed in today's day and age, specifically around people of color? Has it become more accepted? I mean, I've seen in the NBA, guys have started to come out and be a little bit more open about their mental health.
Yep.
But even when they talk about it, they specifically mention that like it's not talked about, in those types of communities. So like, what have you seen firsthand? Have you seen it? Like, what does the trajectory look like?
Matt, I've seen mental health, and I'm so appreciative for this. Even before the pandemic, mental health, has been streamlined. And so talking through certain things, you find people, whether on television. One of my favorite shows is Married at First Sight, and watching the therapist really talk through like, hey, this is what he's experiencing. This is what she's experiencing. Oh, this is what that is. Oh, she's facing childhood. People have more context into what that is now. And so I think it's definitely mainstream. And to watch, even in my community now, I watch my friends, I watch a lot of black men say, I have a therapist, and hey, I'm putting this on my calendar because I have to go see my therapist. And I'm like, what? Like this was not talked about like this 10 years ago. And so to watch one of my friends say, hey man, yeah, I got therapy twice a week, or yeah, man, I talked to my therapist and he said XYZ. Or one of my other colleagues like, yeah, man, I have therapy at 4 p.m. Or yeah, man, I was talking to my therapist and he told me like I need to write, a letter to myself. And I was like, wow. And what I'm watching now is a lot of people become more aware of what's happening in them. Because without therapy and without counseling, you don't have a blueprint. You just have a feeling. But you need somebody to help you walk through not just a feeling, but to navigate through the maze of what you're feeling. Because that's what therapy does. It literally takes you on a maze. When you're going to hit a bump, you're going to hit something that looks like a dead end, but you don't know if you go right, you can find an outlet. And so therapy for me, Matt, it started to really help me, deal with a lot of things, deal with a lot of the pressures of life. Why was it so hard for me to really navigate, into responsibility? It's because I was really sheltered. But why were you sheltered? I was sheltered because my family they were literally trying to keep me away from the pain they experienced. Right. And
You really are able to peel back this onion that's like never ending.
You could peel back the onion. Yeah. And it's never, and Matt, I love that you said that. It is literally never ending, because in every season of your life, when there's something new introduced to you, something that you experienced from years ago is going to come up in a different way. But therapy helps you in every season deal with something. It gives you the strategy to deal with something and gives you the language so that when the thing comes up, you know how to address it.
Kenneth,
Yeah.
just bigger picture question for you
Yeah.
here. You grew up and almost like got the taste of 31 flavors, if you will.
Yeah.
You were around a man that, as a father figure, was a little bit more absent. You were around a pastor who then took on a father figure. You've been a part of so many multiple different environments and different influences. You've had your own experiences. You become a father, you became a husband.
Yeah.
I'm curious at this point in your life, for everyone who's listening, and particularly those who are men who are listening that think they have it all figured out, I would ask someone like you specifically, what does it mean to you to be a man, a masculine man?
Yeah, it's and that's so good. That's so good, Mike. I think let's move masculinity away from manhood, right? Let's talk more about just the role of being a man. I think that Mike, that's a really good question. I haven't really journeyed through that. I think, but for me, being a man was really learning how to take life and responding well. It was when I knew that I could face opposition. I think that all men do. We are men, we are warriors, right? Whatever your ethnicity, whatever your orientation, whatever your background, all of us are warriors. Every man in America, every man outside of America, in every continent, all of us have muscles. Not excluding women. All of us have muscles, right? Some guys, their muscles show more than others. However, but every last one of us, we have muscles internally and externally. We're warriors. We were built to be warriors, which means that not only are we physically capable, but we are mentally capable of responding well. We lead the charge. There's a saying that says that women are the weaker vessels, not because they're weak, but because men, we lead the charge. We literally prepare the way so that the women and the children can come. I think that to be a man simply means responding well to opposition. For me, because I was in a house with feminine energy, my mom and my grandmother, I saw them respond to opposition, and I did not know how to respond to opposition because I didn't have a template, right? But what helped me, like you said, Mike, I am a mutt. I literally I have experience from all over the place. But what I've learned from even the spaces with other men was, yeah, get through it. You'll be fine. You'll be okay. You will be okay. I am literally, to this day, Mike, I have lived the worst of my days. I am going to go through some other stuff in life, but right now where I'm sitting, I have overcome all of the horrible things that I've experienced, all of them, because right now there's nothing else going on in my life that I can say that has taken me out or wiped me out. I've learned to navigate through it. So for every man that's watching today, whoever you are, wherever you show up, however you want to be to the world, the only thing that I'm saying that makes you a man is responding well to every season of your life. Knowing how to really navigate. Yeah.
Yeah, the responding well piece, I think we need to be objective in what that means, and perhaps the physical
Yes.
side of it we can table for now, and let's just focus on the mental side,
Yep.
because as men, what I'm understanding from you is we have a responsibility, to respond well mentally. What does
Yeah.
responding well mentally to a situation mean?
Yeah. And Mike, I grew up watching a lot of men respond with anger, rage, and there's a gap. So wherever there's anger, there's fear. And fear, anger is the byproduct of fear. And so I grew up in an era. I knew some people who punched holes through walls to express themselves. When I was in high school, most of the young men that I was around, in order to express themselves, they will pick a fight or they will fight. Right? People, the men around me naturally, or the young men around me naturally, were fighters. And I think that's really how I've watched young men navigate through life or through the pressures. My grandfather, he would fight. If it wasn't with his hand, it would be, with his mouth. And so I think for me, Mike, and that's a really good question, mentally, we do have a responsibility to show the world that when there is pressure, when there is turmoil, when there is something that doesn't go our way, that we are not just, let's be emotional. I can cry through it, but the response is, I'm going to get through it and I'm going to be okay. And so a lot of men have given up. And I want to say this. There are a lot of men, I know two gentlemen who were victims of suicide. And for those of you that are listening, if you are dealing with that, please, there are people that can help you. The 1-800-SUICIDE hotline, please go and get some help if you need somebody to talk to right now. But a lot of men did not know how to deal with the pressures, and if not fighting through it, they would the young men that I knew took their lives. And so when I say respond well, Mike, I simply mean literally walking through, getting language, going to see a therapist, understanding some of the wounds, some of the things that you've encountered, and really applying some of that language to your life and saying, hey, whatever I experience, I'm going to be okay. It doesn't matter what it looks like. I'm going to get through this.
There's a power in language that
Yeah.
in a lot of our conversations we haven't really come across, but I find myself sometimes when I'm struggling to understand something, I'll come across a word in my research that I never knew prior to my research, and then in that
Yeah.
find out the definition of that word.
Yeah.
After learning the definition of that word, a lot of things make sense because I just didn't know that that word existed.
Yeah.
Does a word come to mind for
Mm.
you in terms of a word that most people or the average person isn't using in their everyday vocabulary that you think is a
Mm.
productive word for men to learn, or anyone really, to learn more about anything from mental health to trauma to self-awareness to anything that you can impart on us today?
Mm-hmm.
A single word?
Just a word, a complex word. Maybe your grandmother learned it or just anyone
Mm-hmm.
has learned it.
That's tough. I was thinking about it as you're asking. I'm like, shoot.
Yeah, that is tough.
You got an
Mike,
example?
Um, let me think. I asked the question. That's not fair.
right,
Um,
right.
it doesn't have to be an overly complex word, but maybe just
Yeah.
one that's not everyday vocabulary that you think is an important one for us to maybe dig into the dictionary on.
Yeah, I think that it is a word that is a part of our everyday, usage. I think that for the sake of this conversation, it is worthy of bringing up, and that word is journey. That word is journey. That's the one thing that I can think of, Mike. And the reason why I say that is because journey simply means I'm just reminded of how when someone goes on a journey, they go on a scenic route. They see all types of things. If I'm traveling to another state, if I'm doing a road trip, I need to stop and I need to get gas. I need to use the restroom, right? There are pit stops. Journeying is about stopping. It's about pausing. It's about reflecting. It's about being alone. It's about being with someone. It's about moving forward. But most importantly, it's about making it and arriving to a destination. And I think what I want everybody to know, and what every man listening, every man in the arena right now, every man that's fighting, every man who is preparing for the battle, every man who is, and when I say arena, I'm talking about like we're in the boxing ring right now, right? It could be anything, right? You could be in the arena getting ready to sing. It could be anything. But when I think of the man in the arena, I'm thinking of a boxing match. We are prepared. We are either lightweight or heavyweight, and we have coaches behind us. We have what do you call that? We're popping in our teeth, the guard for our teeth. We have our face protected. We're greased up, making sure that we're not going to be bruised up as much. But we are getting ready to journey. And for those that are listening, if you are a man in the arena and you're preparing for this season, not really aware of what's happening in your life, you feel like giving up, my request of you is to keep journeying. Because when you journey, you've got to fight, you've got to pause, you've got to reflect, but it's not giving up. It's not giving up. It's continuing until you arrive at a place that you can finally look back and say, I remember when I was there, and here is my story. This is why I can be a part of this podcast today, is because I'm looking back at a part of my journey in the rearview mirror to say, I remember when I was there, and here I am today, letting you know that this is what I've come through. This is how I show up, but y'all, this is where I'm going. So yeah.
Well,
Amen.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was extremely powerful, Kenneth. Thank you for that. I was gonna say my word, and it is pretty mainstream now, but I think vulnerability.
Yes.
Because I think, again, you hear vulnerability and you think weakness, but
Yes.
I read the definition of vulnerability, and it's the willingness to show emotion or to allow one's weaknesses to be seen or known, and the capability or being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed, either physically or emotionally.
Yep.
And so I think that when you think about that, it's like, wow, that actually takes a lot of strength.
Yes.
You're exposing yourself to be harmed. You're also allowing yourself to be loved.
Yep.
As well, and putting yourself out there. You were going to say something. I just want to
Yeah,
hear your
Matt,
response.
you're right. I'm being strong to be weak. Right? It's a strength. Vulnerability is a strength, but I'm being strong to show forth my weakness. But I think at the end of the day, this is something that I practice all the time, and even now, I get a chance to raise a son. Most men that I know have either told their sons or my uncles around me, like, "Hey, we don't do no crying around me. We don't do that." But now I'm letting my son, no, cry it out. Daddy's here, right? Or how do you feel? And these are moments that I live, that I adopt for myself. If I'm having a sad day, I don't try to hide it. I'm just, if somebody asks me in the morning, "Hey, Kenneth, how are you feeling?" I'm okay. Or I'm not doing so well today. Or if I am doing well, I'm doing very, very well today. Or like elevator talk. I'm on my way to the office. Somebody, "How are you feeling?" "I am extremely tired today. I am exhausted, but I'm still pushing. Oh man, I am too. It gathers conversation, and Matt, you never really know if you are really vulnerable. You don't know that your neighbor has either gone through what you've gone through, and they may have the strength and the remedy for you to come out of where you are. That's what vulnerability does. It exposes your weakness so you can become strong, because I guarantee you there's somebody in the world that does not look like you, that does not sound like you, who does not come from where you come from, who has the strength and the strategy to get you to where you need to
And
be.
we can relate to that firsthand during our conversation during lunch. So, like, to your point,
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
couldn't agree more with.
Just a key piece in the definition of vulnerability that just jumped out to me was the word allow. And I looked
Yeah.
up the definition of allow. I know what allow means, but I wanted a more formal definition, and it speaks to giving someone the permission to do something. And in the context of vulnerability, we have to give ourselves, perhaps as men, the permission to ourselves to do something vulnerable or to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling to me how we have to ask ourselves permission, meaning like it's not just widely accepted, or it's not just organically out there. It's something that we have to actually deliberately put an effort into to get us to that place. And that's the work I think, Matt, you've talked about multiple times, but perhaps we're combating a force there, a wall, a stigma, an external pressure, societal pressure, where we have to give ourselves permission to go against that grain.
That grain, and also just like being a human. Like our
Yeah.
bodies we're wired to want to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
But in order to feel all the things I just mentioned, you have to allow yourself to feel these things and to express your weaknesses. Kenneth, I want to leave you with one final question before we wrap up our rapid fire questions. But like, what is your purpose? Like, why are you here right now? What are you trying to do?
Yeah. I think, Matt, that changes for me every season, as I get to know a little bit more about myself, and how I show up, how I impact the world. But I think, my purpose is bigger than my profession, which my equitable commitment has been to boys and young men of color. But my purpose, is for families. It's to build families and people. I'm here to build people. When you think of building something, I'm talking about like a tower, like a building, starting from the foundation, making sure that people have a foundation, whether that be a foundation of discipline. I'm a stickler on, if I can't trace you, I can't train you, right? If I don't know where you come from, I don't know what context to really give to your life. But a part of my life, my purpose is to lay a foundation in everybody's life, so that whomever helps to build on that foundation can build knowing that the foundation is strong. And whenever that person goes through a storm, it'll never ever be knocked down because the foundation is sure. Whether that's having the literacy, or just having a place or an outlet, or having wisdom on how to navigate uncertainty, whatever that looks like. It looks different for everybody. But my purpose in the world is to lay foundations in people's lives so that people have a sturdy beginning, and a very definite future.
This is very, very powerful, Kenneth.
Yeah.
We got three rapid fire, and thank you so much for coming on. I'm super, super glad we met,
Absolutely.
and our lives cross in the very just the you call it weird way, but just
Yeah.
you'd never thought in a million years that we'd be sitting here today.
That's right.
What is your favorite quote, or just like the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
It's a really good question.
You've dropped a bunch of good ones yourself over the last hour or so.
I think, and I'm trying to draw from, and I think, Matt, you've heard me say this, but the advice that I gave our students when we were in the room together was, whenever you walk into the room, don't hang your head down, raise up your head, because when you sit at a table, you're not sitting at a table because you are invited. You are the table. And when I enter into the room, I enter into the room as if I'm inviting people to my table, into who I am, my presence. I don't walk into a room where I'm shy. I'm commanding the room, the space, wherever I am, not because I'm prideful or I'm arrogant, overconfident. I am doing that because who I am impacts other people. And whenever somebody sits at this table, they're going to walk away and they're going to leave with peace. It's because that's what exudes from my life. And so that's
I
been
mean, that's what it did for me.
yeah.
That's why I came up to you after you guys were all done.
Matt, I would say the same thing for you, man. Like there was so much sobriety that exude from you. You know what I mean? Like you doing this podcast is this is what you're supposed to do, right? But when I sat at the table with you, I was like, there was so much peace that I felt when I left the lunch with you. I was like, oh no, this is someone that I need in my life. Just more so, you never really know why you have a connection. And I shared that with you before. I was like, hey Matt, if I need something, I'm calling Matt. If I need to, if I need language about something, I need to be connected to that form of peace because of where I'm going, not because of where I've been.
Very, very powerful,
Yeah.
Kenneth. Secondly, if you could have dinner with anyone in the world, dead or alive, who would it be?
It would definitely be with Jay-Z.
And why?
It would be with Jay-Z is because Jay-Z is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to business and dealing with people from all aspects. One of the richest rappers, but I think that he has so many jewels as to how to be successful. Not just in hip hop, but just more so his work ethic. Like, how do you juggle being 1,000 things at one time? And I think that that's something that I would love to adapt. Jay-Z, if you're listening to this podcast and you want...
I'll reach out to his team, see if we can get him on here.
I'll work on keeping a straight face on that one.
Listen, come on, Mike. Like, push it. I really would love to go to dinner with him because, again, I want to pluck his mind because I think that as he gets older, even in the game, not just being Beyonce's husband, but just even managing her and making sure she's successful, managing his career and literally putting it to the side, literally giving up most of what he's done in music to help other people and then to be a billionaire. How in the world do you do it? That's what I want to know.
Okay, lastly, what do you like to do in your free time, hobbies, that kind of thing?
I'm a cook. Put me in the kitchen, give me a glass of champagne, rosé, and some smooth jazz, and I'll take it from there. Cooking, I have actually, it's finished, but I do have a cookbook. It's about 300 pages long, and I have not released it yet. I think
send one this way.
I will. So I love to eat really clean and really healthy. And I just, during the pandemic, even before, I learned how to cook whole foods. And a part of this book, the story in the book is how my family ate, like Southern cuisine, soul food, really greasy, food that doesn't make you healthy, and how I started from there and became healthy while I was in college. And that's a whole nother story. But also, I just learned how to use whole foods and add like really strong herbs like turmeric and all of this other stuff to my food to really make me healthy. And so it's a cookbook that's going to be coming out really, really soon, hopefully sometime in the fall. And I'll let you know about it.
All right, yeah, you're making me hungry just talking about it. But all right, we're going to wrap up here. Kenneth, again, thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
What'd you think?
I thought it was